All right, good to go? Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November Mappy Q&A with the Geospatial Professional Network's Vanguard Cabinet. We've organized this event so people with interest in the geospatial topics have the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time, and we get to answer them live. As this is our last Mappy Q&A of the year, we've invited our outgoing Vanguard members to join us and share their final words of wisdom. We'll be more general with our responses so we can tackle as many of the submitted questions as we can, but as always, we are a resource if you'd like to deep dive into the answers. We're going to get started with Ethan introducing GPN, and then we'll have our Vanguard Cabinet introduce themselves, and we'll jump into the Q&As.
Thanks, Olga. Yeah, hey everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Ethan McGhee. I'm the chair of the GPN Vanguard Cabinet. So if you haven't heard of the Geospatial Professional Network, or maybe you've heard of it as EURISA, we've rebranded into GPN. We're a nonprofit organization of professionals using GIS. And we really try to provide training experiences and general outreach to spread the word of GIS and our community that we have here. So as many of you know, GIS is fantastic, and then we've got a lot of amazing people. And so GPN is trying to lump all of us together in a great group so that way we can collaborate and network amongst one another. The Vanguard Cabinet is an advisory board within GPN. We're full of young geospatial professionals wanting to make an impact in our community, specifically the Young Professional Network. So this is an opportunity for us to interact with you all through these Mappy Q&A events. So we're really grateful that you're here, whether you're live in person or watching this recording later. We're glad that you've tuned in and are listening to some of the advice that we're going to be able to bring to you. We've got an amazing panel of members here today. Like I said, the Vanguard Cabinet is an advisory board, and we're on a 3-year rotating basis. So the members here giving the Mappy Q&A are the outgoing members. They've spent the last 3 years really trying to promote GIS through the GPN. And so this is kind of the last final hurrah. So just wanted to thank everyone here for doing that and providing their insights one last time on the Vanguard Cabinet. If you've got any more questions, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, here's our panelists. Olga, I'll take it back to you.
Awesome. Yes, I'll kick it also to Becky to start the introductions.
Yeah, thanks, Olga, and thanks, Ethan, for that great intro to the VC. Great to see everybody again from the Outgoing Cabinet, and also to all of our attendees today. Super excited to have all of you guys. My name's Becky Schneider. I'm the Outgoing VC Outreach Chair. So excited to pass the torch to the next group. And thank everybody again for putting this together. I'm the program manager for all of our USGS and Army Corps programs at SAM, or Surveying Mapping LLC. Background is in federal contracting for LiDAR remote sensing and GIS development work. Over to you, Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan Carmona. I am the outgoing conference committee chair. I have a background in local government and the private sector. I am currently the GIS supervisor in Pierce County, Washington.
I can go next. My name is Kendal Price. I am the outgoing mentoring chair. We run the GPN mentoring network. I have a variety of different industry experience in GIS. Currently, I work for an engineering firm called UES, and I'm a GIS analyst in their environmental consulting division. My background is in water utilities and forestry and logistics and data science. And I also have my GISP certification. I'll pass it off to Sara.
Hey everyone, my name is Sara Thompson. I am the outgoing chair of the Vanguard Cabinet, and I have a background in state government. I work for Arizona Department of Transportation as a GIS section manager, and have a little bit of experience in consulting and an education background in biology.
Thank you so much, you guys. And I'm Olga Tambazidis. I'm currently on the Vanguard with Ethan, and I'm the GIS Tech 2 for the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. So we're going to get started with our Q&As. Our first one, what is the best way to prepare for your first GIS interview? Handing this off to Jordan.
Okay, so I have been on lots of GIS interviews on both sides of the desk. So outside of, finding some interview questions to work on, I think that probably the most effective way to prepare for your GIS interview is to actually record yourself, right? So what I've done is I've opened up Zoom, meeting of one, recorded myself giving answers, and then looking back on it. And when you're doing that, you can really dial in on some of the mannerisms that you have, whether or not you're saying uhs and ums a lot. Generally, also, when I'm in an interview, I put a sticky note on my monitor wherever my webcam is, so I'm looking at it. And then also like put a smiley face on it, so I remember to use nice facial expressions and all of that for virtual interviews anyway. Yeah, in-person interviews are a little bit easier to kind of connect with them and maintain eye contact. But yeah, that's what I would recommend is watch the footage of your recorded answers and really look for, are you telling a good story? Are you easy to follow? Is it easy to understand the point of what it is, right? If you are feeling pins and needles and like, wow, this is really dragging, that's likely what the other person is going to be thinking when you're having that moment. So that's the sum total of my wisdom is record yourself, watch it, and hopefully be amazed and, make some changes if you need to.
Fantastic, Jordan. Thank you. What do most candidates overlook? I'm going to hand that over to Becky.
Yeah, I think this kind of feeds off of what Jordan was saying about preparation. And as you're going into a application or interview process and you're preparing, there's some things that as someone who's been on both sides of the hiring process recently, I feel like is often overlooked. And those two things are a compliant application and then also a clear demonstration of soft professional skills. I would say when it comes to compliant applications, if you aren't doing this already, you should 100% be tailoring your cover letter and resume to every single job that you apply to, so that you are specifically addressing requirements and terminology that are used in position descriptions. At larger companies, obviously resumes are often going to be filtered through systems that are going to search for specific keywords. So making sure that you reflect those keywords as much as possible throughout your resume and cover letter is going to help set you apart there and get you through that process. But then it's smaller, like companies or local governments or just smaller groups, hiring managers are usually going to review your resume or application individually. So having those tailored resumes and cover letters is going to show that attention to detail and a certain level of focus on the application that'll help you stand out. And I will say, while you're specifically addressing, key requirements and terminology, make sure that you're using concrete values and demonstrated successes throughout your resume. Like, for example, say, I delivered 2,000 square miles of this specific type of hydro data set in this AOI this many weeks early with this amount, like with zero quality errors, instead of just saying, I worked on X, Y, and Z project. Be really specific and use action verbs and key accomplishments as you write all of this, and make sure that you speak to those requirements that are listed as being needed in the PD. And then the second thing overall would say, don't overlook the importance of soft skills. I may be one of the less technical people on this call, which is cool. So those hard skills are super important, but in a competitive market like this one, being able to show soft skills when a lot of people are going to have the same technical skills is what's going to set you apart from the rest of the applicants. Obviously, technical skills are super important, but your soft skills are going to play a really significant role in how you'll perform in your position and interact with others. And showing that, communication, problem solving, leadership, organization, time management skills are always a bonus. They show self-awareness, and they're ultimately going to make you a more trusted and valuable resource to the company throughout. So I would say, focus on compliant, strong resume and the importance of soft skills. I know those maybe seem basic, but I would say that's what to focus on. But I know we have some other hiring managers on the call. So if anyone wants to add really quick to my answer, please.
Yeah, Becky, I actually just wanted to jump in and say I just wrote an article on the Esri YPN blog space talking about the importance of soft skills, and I actually am trying to rebrand it and have this whole movement to call them essential skills, because I think that they are really, really important, like you say. So if anybody's curious, they can go check out the Esri YPN blog space and see that article there.
Thank you guys so much. I know that question overlaps a lot with this one, so Becky's going to help us out, but focus on the remote aspect of the competition of the job. So what would you say kind of with the remote twist?
Yeah, this is another great question. And I know that this is a really hot topic right now because there's, a lot of mandated return to office policies that are coming out, and a lot of folks maybe moved or relocated during COVID when location was not as important for roles, and that's, becoming more of an issue now. And I understand that it's frustrating to hear folks say, just wait, the right job will come along at the right time. And it feels like it's taking forever and can be really discouraging, especially in a job market like this one. But I will say I actually just started a new fully remote position 4 weeks ago. And so I understand the challenges of going through this process. And so hopefully these tips will help you guys hunker down and be able to move through. And the nice thing is that a lot of the tips that I'm going to give now are also super applicable for any job, whether it's remote or in person, but will help set you apart a little bit more specifically remote for remote jobs. So I would say start when you're search for both remote jobs and also jobs that you would be an excellent fit for, even if it's not necessarily listed as remote. Because if you're like a unicorn candidate with specific skills, hiring managers are sometimes going to be more flexible about where you are located and not needing you in person. Obviously, the caveat is like I've been in federal contracting for my entire career, and if there are like clearance requirements or there are on-site requirements for a contract, there isn't as much wiggle room, but for plenty of companies and positions there is. So definitely keep an eye out and see if you can work in any flexibility. After that, I would say the 3 key things to focus on are being able to demonstrate general skills you need for remote work, finding a niche specialization and skill set, and then increasing your online presence and portfolio. The first one, demonstrating the general skills needed for remote work. You want to be able to show through your resume and interview as much self-sufficiency and ability to work autonomously as you can. Show them that you don't need to necessarily be handheld through processes or work regardless of what kind of environment you're in. Obviously, you can reach out at any time to ask for questions and feedback, but being able to drive your own work regardless of where you're located is super important. Also effective communication. I know we talked about that. I'm going to use Ethan's term, essential skills. Communication is a huge one, regardless of where you are, but especially if you're physically removed from the team that you're working with, being able to effectively communicate virtually is really important. So being able to demonstrate that. Specializing in niche skills is really important too. Seeking out niche, both geospatial and non-geospatial skills that are in high demand are going to make you more marketable, again, regardless of where you are, and make you into more of a unicorn candidate. Right now, big ones are data science, integrated with GIS, machine learning, Python always, and big data analysis and analytics, always in demand. And then there are other specialized skills and certifications that'll make you stand out. Like Kendal mentioned, she has her GISP. That's a big one. If there's certain like certified photogrammetrist or other ASPRS licenses, if you're in lidar or remote sensing, stuff like that to look into. And then maybe non-spatial, companies are always looking for Scrum Masters and other Agile certifications. So keep an eye out for those too and work on those in the background. And then third, your online presence and portfolio are always going to be big ones. A strong network is going to be your best tool to kind of propel you, even if you have all those other things, but having that network is going to keep you top of mind. It's going to increase your reputability, and having those connections are going to be able to reach out to you as they hear of opportunities or say your name when you're not in the room, or even if they're hiring themselves, keeping you top of mind is super important. And that visibility, being able to share all of your work, your projects, your connections, everything is going to, again, increase your reputability. But I know that I think there's some portfolio questions later, and the VC has a ton of great resources on portfolios. So check those out, listen in later. But I would say, again, those are probably my top tips for remote jobs.
That's incredible, Becky. Thank you for being so thorough, but also broad with it all. So our next question, and we're staying on the jobs topic, how long does a GIS job search usually take? In the process of looking for my next geospatial job, and it's taken a while and getting to be challenging, and I'm gonna hand this off to Jordan.
Okay, great. So, the answer is it depends. I would throw out the following is that when you are applying for a job, normally there will be like a job closing date. And so if you're not hearing back by 1 month after the job closing date, then they're ghosting you, and that's fine. If you are not hearing back from any company or any organization, then you need to look at your materials that you're supplying to them, right? So this goes back to, do you have an appropriate portfolio, right? Is it like nice and curated, or is it just a hodgepodge of school projects? I had a portfolio for my first job, and it was horrible with horrible school projects that I did, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. So if you're gonna do the thing, make sure you do it well, because it either presents a great picture of you, or it's a really big visible excuse for them to put your resume right in the bin. Yeah, definitely cover letter, and your cover letter should excite them to see your resume. It shouldn't just regurgitate the same stuff that's on your resume, and it should really be an invitation to them to see you as a person and to get some of those essential skills out into the world, because it's kind of hard to put that on your resume, right? A team player, what does that mean? And why would I put on a resume? I don't know. But in a cover letter, you can definitely be able to tell a short story and things of that nature. So if you're not hearing back from anyone, likely it's the materials that you're supplying. And then also, depending on what sector you're looking into, there's definitely a dry season and a wet season for work, right? So in the government sector, the new fiscal year starts in October normally, and so all their positions will open up in October. And then for the rest of the year, it's going to be a lot more lean. Private sector companies will hire whenever. So that is also something to consider. But yeah, definitely. It will take a while, especially if you don't have previous industry experience, right? And if that's the case, then what you need to do, and this is going to get in the weeds just a little bit, is on your resume, you need to treat your school experience like project or work experience, right? It's not enough to just say, I went to so-and-so college and got such and such degree, because the person, me or someone else that's looking at your resume, didn't go to so-and-so college and didn't get a what's its face degree, right? That means nothing to them. So what's better is listing some of the courses you've done as like minimum bar there. And then what's even better is to describe the work that you've done in terms of different styles of analysis, different data sets, all sorts of things. Be able to describe it as did all these things, and then you can list like the classes that applies to, right? So if you treat your school like work experience, you're going to have better uptake from the hiring manager, because it's just always kind of a black box of, did this person learn something at their school or not, right? Because education is a lot of what you put into it, the effort you put into it. You can't just like go to a school and expect to be job ready. I mean, I'm sure there's some schools out like that, but a lot of it is what effort did you put in, and the way to show that effort is by appropriately building a portfolio, having a resume, and doing cover letter. I'm going to stop talking now.
No, that was perfect, Jordan. Thank you. I think keeping the timelines of when people are hiring too is helpful for like personal planning, and maybe if you're thinking of a job jump or something, and you just keep those things in mind. So that was fantastic. Thank you. So beyond a portfolio, how else can you communicate skills to potential employers? And I'm gonna hand this off to Sara.
Yeah, we all hear so much about portfolios being the end all be all of being the way that we can showcase the skills to an employer, but there's a few other avenues. I mean, not that many. We don't get too many opportunities to showcase the skills to employers. So a few that come to mind are, we have the interview, we might have a pre-application questionnaire, which I know some people get annoyed by that, but that is another opportunity we could take advantage of. And then if you're just general networking, meeting people, those are some other avenues. So when you are trying to look for a new job or enter the GIS industry, you know that people are going to be asking you these questions, most likely in the interview, about your skills, what things do you do well, or looking for what things you might not be as strong at. So I would highly recommend preparing those scenarios ahead of time. They're going to be asking you some questions, and having those responses ready to go will come across so much more strongly than another candidate who has to sit and kind of brainstorm through that question. So the portfolio is really good at highlighting your technical skills. That's kind of its strong suit. So these scenario-based situations that you're trying to come up with, start thinking about how can you highlight those, like we're calling them now, essential skills. We're taking like a bingo here. Is do I have past leadership experience? Am I good? Am I a good team member? Am I good a collaborator? So taking those scenarios, and I think Jordan said it really well, of it can be work-based. That's probably the most straightforward way, but definitely you can lean on the experiences that you had in school, whether you were in a GIS club or it was just GIS 101. What was the problem or task that you were facing, and how did you use that skill to get you through that problem or task? And then, of course, talking them through the result. That helps you highlight those essential skills. And you can throw in some scenarios about technical skills as well. So those are kind of the avenues that I'm thinking of, that in addition to a portfolio, those that we have to communicate skills. And I want to leave with that while a portfolio is really technical focused, you can also expand it to cover some of these soft skills as well, adding additional sections that talk about your professional organization involvement, that show some of your posters if you've done presentations in schools or presentations at conferences and so on, that can highlight some of your writing, some of your speaking, and some of your collaborative nature. The portfolio doesn't just need to be, here's a map, here's data, the end.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Sarah. I agree that thinking about the questions, what you might be asked, and even the challenging questions beforehand and having that good story to tell and having that practice is a fantastic way to highlight yourself. Okay, so our next question, what are some different ways to get a GIS job? Are there specific ways that help in getting responses from employers? And what are some techniques that you recommend mastering to stay ahead in the GIS field? And I'm gonna hand this off to Kendal.
Thanks, Olga. Yeah, I think one of the first things to consider, obviously, we know internships are very valuable experience. I'd say from my own experience, what I learned in school versus what I learned on the job experience was so helpful with understanding what an actual enterprise GIS looks like, working with messy data, working with real databases. Um, these are things that I feel like educational programs are catching up on a little bit. Internships as well can be really valuable in just getting hired full time. If you do a really good job, they usually will entertain the idea of hiring you on full time. A lot of entry-level GIS jobs are also contract work. So this is common with engineering firms and public utilities where you see the GIS technician role and they're doing a lot of data creation and data editing. I would not discount these jobs either because there's such high turnover and high conversion to full-time positions that while you are doing the grunt work of learning the fundamentals of GIS really fast, it's going to be foundational for the rest of your career, learning the basics of data management and cartography and editing data in a database, for example. Also, network connections are huge. I would say a few of the jobs I've had have been just from network connections and talking to people and knowing the right questions to ask. The position I'm currently in was because I talked to someone at the company for a different job position and realized they needed GIS skills, and I was able to create a part-time position for myself because I understood where my skill sets could fit in with the needs of the company. So this is a unique way to, especially in the private sector, you could utilize this strategy. Public sector, they're usually very fixed on full-time established positions. Specific ways in helping getting response from employers. This kind of ties back to Jordan's question. Sometimes the needs of the company change throughout the hiring process and they don't communicate that well to candidates, or they aren't communicating to candidates that they've been rejected, which can be really discouraging. That's also a downside for the companies because they may be missing out on really fantastic candidates if they're not acting in a timely manner. So a technique I've used in the past is actually looking people up on LinkedIn. Whether it's a job I'm interested in or a job I'm following up on, I'll search for an HR or recruiter title. I'll search for a GIS manager title. I'll connect with that person. and say, hey, I submitted this application. I wanted to see how your team is doing. I wanted to see, have scopes or requirements change for your team, making it more about the company's needs and less about my needs and concerns, and seeing how I can play a part and how I'm excited to potentially be considered. So I've used that in the past on LinkedIn and just doing some searching for keywords of people and titles and companies. Some techniques that I recommend mastering to stay ahead in the GIS field. Definitely take technical courses. If you're a student, you have really wide access to Esri training that your librarian or your GIS professor can connect you with. And there's a lot that are free. YouTube, Udemy, Linda, those are all great, very low cost or free platforms to do GIS training. Definitely utilize a GIS mentor. GPN and the program I used to run, the mentoring network, offers 3 cohorts a year where you can get one-on-one connected with a mentor, ask specific questions about your goals, about your career path. Other organizations like Esri YPN also have a lot of resources and blogs for just general mentorship content. In terms of mastering things in the GIS field, if you're trying to come into the GIS field and you are looking at how can I stand out? Some really parallel skills that are high in demand right now are IT and security analysts, and how that ties in with setting up an enterprise GIS, database administration, data science, being a web developer. If you are already keen on those things, bringing in that spatial thinking and geospatial knowledge is really going to set you apart. And there's a high demand for those specializations.
Perfect, Kendall. Thank you so much. It was inspiring to hear how you created your own part-time job. That's a very unique and awesome way of getting a GIS job. I love it. All right, so we are on our next question. What are the most common entry points into the GIS industry? And what qualifications or experiences are typically required, especially in spatial ecology? And I know we've talked on this a couple of times, but I'm sure Sara will have more to share with us.
Yeah, I think the most common entry point in terms of what title you might see is definitely GIS technician. And I think this would also be a great opportunity for people to put in the chat what kinds or what titles did they have in their first job, because GIS titles can be all over the board, and I would double check the skills that they're asking for and the job responsibilities, because the title could be something completely different, but really it's essentially a GIS technician is what they're looking for. So don't be scared away from trying to expand that job search to get your foot into the industry. And don't be scared by it not having GIS in the title. When I was first trying to break into the GIS industry, I saw so many entry-level positions, technician positions in real estate, in utilities, and in engineering firms. These companies are often very large. I think, someone else was mentioning some high turnover. Those are great places that they're hungry to have new people join them and be expanding the services that they provide. So that's kind of what I saw when I was joining the industry about 5 years ago. And I got my start at an engineering consulting firm and kind of took off from there. As far as what qualifications and experiences they're looking for in entry level, the most important thing I can recommend is don't take that list of requirements as set in stone. It's really what they see as the best candidate, a dream candidate would have every single skill and qualification that they list, but it's not a hard requirement that it may come across as when you're first reading a job description. So if you fit a decent number of them, still feel free to apply, especially when you're trying to break in. You're not going to have all of the skills that they're asking for, but a lot of the times they can teach you, and they're happy to do so. Talking more about the education requirement, especially as it relates to, say, spatial ecology or other sciences, they definitely will be looking more for that education that you fit into, that you have an ecology degree or definitely something related like biology, or even like range management, I've heard of is a very kind of niche ecology related industry there. And they may have a hard requirement for that you have a master's or potentially even a PhD for some positions. So do pay special attention to that. But as we've talked about, make sure that if you don't have that internship experience or even volunteer experience, make sure that you're hitting that school experience, that you can show to this employer that you have this base level of GIS skill despite not having what they say relevant experience, because we all know it's such a paradox where an entry-level position is requiring 2 years of experience, but you can't get the experience because they all require experience and so on. So don't see 2 years or even 3 years of experience as a non-starter. Put in your application anyway and stress the skills and experiences that you do have in whatever manner you were able to get those in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I've heard the don't exclude yourself before they can exclude you. So, just apply even when you feel like you have those. Ethan, I see you
Yeah.
unmuted yourself. You have
Yeah,
something
no,
to
I was just
add?
gonna say in the
Yeah.
chat, there's a bunch of people chatting on this a little bit more in detail. So if for the participants here, if you guys want to check out that chat as well, there's some good conversation going on in more detail.
Thank you so much. Okay, so our next question. What are the current and emerging trends in the GIS industry that new professionals should be aware of? Handing this off to Jordan.
Okay, great. Okay, so I will start out and say that the shiny stuff is indoors, BIM, which is building interior management, or GeoBIM as they like to call it, and then VR. Not that no one's using that, but no one's using it. Yeah, that's what's gonna be on the big screen or whatever. The GIS spatial stuff in organizations is really on a spectrum, right? You've got, or less so now, but you've got organizations that are just using pen and paper to do workflows, right? They're like, hey, I was here. Then you've got other people that are like using basic GIS to do very basic things of, hey, this is a map and this map is of this place, and then we're going to write a letter to go along with it or something. And then you've got people doing other things. So like the implementation of spatial is really, it's on a spectrum, and it really depends on how mature the organization is, how much money they're willing to spend on it, and what their expertise level is. Sometimes an organization can really build a really well-equipped GIS, right? But if it all depends on one person and then that person leaves, there's going to be a level of fallback on that. So all of that as context, I would say that the current trend, right? If you wanted to be like, okay, I want to hitch my wagon, if I can use a folksy term, I want to hitch my wagon to something, like what would it be? I would really say asset management is probably a hot ticket item. And what I mean by asset management is any piece of physical equipment, or machine or whatever that a company has, or infrastructure, right? Pipes in the ground. All of that needs to be accounted for, of like, when was it built? How long does it normally last? What material is it made out of? Is there a barcode that I can scan? All these kind of things, by and large, most organizations need to have, and most organizations don't have that, right? So that's a really big expansion area in spatial. And really, it's not like when people like asset management throw it around as a jargon term. It's real easy. It is a point on a map, right? Or it's a polygon shape, and it's got some attributes on it, and that's all it is. And it's just the workflow and process of making sure that we document our things, right? Our assets, and then have some sort of maintenance cycle in place, so where we go back to those places and then update the status of that equipment, right? And then the whole idea concept behind it is that we can now make proactive decisions on our capital goods and investments, and we can say, hey, we've repaired that pipe 3 times, and based on all of our data that we have, we know that that pipe will need to be replaced in the next 2 years, right? And so that's like kind of the story that you would tell when you talk about like asset management and things that you're interested in that. And then I would say that the other really big trend in spatial is integrating other business systems into GIS, right? So GIS is just a database with a spatial column. All sorts of business systems that companies buy are also just databases that they have some sort of interface to do their workflow and do their work, right? But the data of it is in a database on the back end. And so being able to push those databases together and bring that data into the GIS instead of staying in whatever business system they bought is really what a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are doing, is trying to get more value from the software that they're buying. So that is what I would recommend if you're looking at trends to follow. It's asset management and database things, being good at SQL and being able to understand the underlying infrastructure of spatial systems. And that's it.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. No, I mean, highlighting what Jordan was saying, my first job from my undergrad was in asset management, especially in California. There's a lot of money from the fire mitigation funds. So and then, fires are not going away. They're only increasing. So that's a highlighting on, utility management, asset management. So absolutely on the same page. And our next question, speaking of portfolios, what should a strong GIS portfolio include, and how can one effectively showcase their work to potential employers? And we got the portfolio king here, Ethan McGhee.
I don't know if I'm the portfolio kid. Thank you, Olga. Yeah, I think a lot of the other panelists have touched on how important a portfolio is. So before I get into what to include in a portfolio, I just want to say, for those that haven't created a portfolio, the two major platforms that I've seen people go about creating one in is ArcGIS Story Maps and Wix. And the reason why I promote those two is because it's really easy to add visual components, the maps that you create, images of the work that you've done. I think that one really cool thing about the GIS field is that we are able to add in visual components to the work that we do. And a portfolio is a great space for us to go about doing that. So I think that is a major thing that all GIS portfolios should include. Yes, you can put text of what you've done, but in a PowerPoint presentation, if you see a slide with a bunch of text on it, you're not going to read it. But if you see a bunch of images, you're going to be more engaged, right? And that's one big benefit of our work, is that it's very visual. So if you can, try to get all of the images and maps and whatnot that you've done. If you're out in the field, try to take some pictures of you working with the GPS device, or going out and interacting with staff and whatnot. Try to get as many visual elements as you can and put that into a portfolio. I think that portfolio is great to show what you've done, and that is kind of a major benefit. And the other thing that I would include on a GIS portfolio would be to try to make it personal about yourself, right? Like, this is a space to showcase who you are as a person. A resume is going to be really basic. You're going to get all of the technical, professional experience that you have. But a portfolio can include both that professional experience and your personal side. So if there's hobbies that you're interested in, or non-professional GIS work that you've done. I think Jordan mentioned earlier that GPN has volunteer opportunities, like the GIS Corps. So if you've done work there, you can mention that and include that in your portfolio. So it really is a space, a comprehensive space for you to include all aspects of your career, whether that be professional or otherwise. I will put in the chat a couple of resources. I think there are a ton of other people's amazing portfolios that you can reference and kind of get a sense of what's a good portfolio and what's not on your own. Kate Berg is a former Vanguard Cabinet member. She has this Google sheet called Maptastic Resources. And in that, she has a sheet of a list of a bunch of people's amazing portfolios across story maps, across Wix sites. And so you can reference that. There's also a couple of YouTube videos. You can type in building a GIS portfolio. Kate has an amazing webinar that the GPN did, I think 2 years ago or so, that goes more into detail on how to actually build a portfolio. And there's a couple other resources out there as well. So I think if you're looking at building a portfolio, I know it's really important and a little overwhelming, but hopefully that should get you on the right foot. And other panelists, feel free to add on if there's other things that I might have missed, but I'll put those links in the chat right now once I'm done speaking. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned this week, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Wix has a free option, and I didn't know that, and that was me avoiding doing Wix. So
correct. Yeah, Wix
I have no
does have a
excuse
free
anymore.
option. Yeah, it'll have like it's like your name.wix.com. So it may not be the fleshed out, I mean, you can do a custom domain if you want to pay for it, and Wix actually makes that pretty easy. But yeah, there's definitely a free option to go about doing that. I recommend that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ethan. On to our next question. Is it ideal to work with ArcGIS? Oh, is it ideal to work with ArcGIS on Mac or PC? Can you talk about system operations and the space required for the software to run successfully? What's your approach to handling large data sets and ensuring performance in GIS applications? And Jordan's going to take this one for us. Oh, you're muted, Jordan.
The mute button.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the GIS realm, right, you've got open source, you got QGIS, you have proprietary software like ArcGIS. Most schools here in the US teach ArcGIS products. So the desktop software for ArcGIS runs on Windows, right? So if you want to run it on a Mac, you have to use a virtualized Windows environment. Does not really utilize your system specs very well. So if you're going to use desktop software for ArcGIS, you need to use Windows products. The server components will run on either Windows or Linux, but from my own personal experience, all the shops that I've seen, everyone just is all Windows all the time. So that is my short answer on that. And then, for the system specs you should run, Esri, of course, puts out a really good system requirements. Are getting steeper and steeper every year as the software grows in capabilities. But generally, if you follow that, you can't really go wrong. And then, the second question, what's your approach to handling large data sets and ensuring performance in GIS applications? There are some types of data that you can just throw more resources at, right? So if you're talking about LiDAR or really big raster data sets, the bigger GPU you're using, the more RAM you're using, you're going to be fine, right? The operations will run as they run. But when you start getting into like really big, massive vector data sets, then you have to really start approaching it from a different way. So generally, and this is a bit on the bleeding edge now, it will become more commonplace, I'm sure, in future. But you would utilize what's called Spark, and that's like distributed computing, massively parallel computer environments. And although it sounds like scary and crazy and whatever, if you understand like Pandas data frames, right, or like R tidyverse data frames, if you understand how to use that programming methodology, then switching over to using Spark and using distributed computing gets a lot easier. But yes, so in some realms, you can just throw more hardware at it, and in other realms, you really have to start approaching it from the whole distributed computing aspect. So that is generally my approach on like large data sets. In my previous work, I worked a lot with big data, and that's what we did.
Thank you, Jordan. All right, our next question. In the environmental industry, what are some of the roles students can consider as they move into the field of GIS? For instance, in weather tracking, how would GIS be utilized? For hydrology and groundwater monitoring, what type of work can they expect in the professional setting? Please provide some examples. And I'm gonna hand this off to Kendal.
Thanks, Olga. So my bachelor's degree was in environmental management, and most students that are in that field will take at least one GIS class in college. Now that I'm a seasoned professional, I can look back and see the decision point that you come to out of college. It's either, do I want to be an environmental scientist, whether that's a biologist, geologist, hydrologist, and I use GIS as a function of my job, maybe some basic map making, some basic data collection, or do I want to truly be a GIS specialist or GIS analyst, which is what I have done, even though I have an environmental background. The more you specialize in GIS, the more niche you become in some of your skills, the opportunity you have to jump around to different industries. For example, I've worked in engineering, consulting, consumer products, forestry, logistics, data science, water utilities. Now I'm back in consulting because of the expertise I've built around this skill that can be applied on top of many industries. So students that are thinking of job titles, a lot of times if you see especially in consulting, an associate scientist role, biologist, ecologist, etc., GIS is almost always a requirement. So everything we've discussed today will still be helpful, but you're probably going to be most limited to some basic, shape file generation or map making. And that will assist your primary role, fine. But where GIS specialists come in is that they're working on advanced programming, data management, web mapping management, for example. And that's where you get a lot of variety and more of the technical things. So think about your personal goals in that sense. For some specific examples, weather data and GIS, an example I worked on in my career was I was helping manage a lot of lumber mills and the logistics of trucking between, logging trucks between those mills. And sometimes the trucking efforts or where chip piles or wood piles were stored outside would be heavily affected by weather alerts. So I helped with areas of interest, which we had mapped as polygons, utilize the National Weather Service Weather API and wrote Python scripts to set up alerts for users when there was a serious weather event coming into the area. So these federal agencies, whether it's the National Weather Service, USGS, which is hydrology and groundwater data, are very valuable and very flexible for incorporating into your own business needs and capabilities. So that's really important if you're a GIS person to understand the business function and the why of you're performing this monitoring. It's more than just looking at cool data. It actually makes a difference. And if you can build tools using GIS as the driver, not only is it easier to see, but it could have a serious business or logistics impact. So that's why our careers are really important in this space. In terms of more student or entry level work in these fields, a lot of field data collection is possible. So in the Esri space, you're designing Survey 123 forms or ArcGIS field map forms where you can get involved into GPS data collection. So sometimes you need really high accuracy GPS if you're doing assets. Sometimes GPS doesn't matter if you're doing things like water quality monitoring on a well. And so someone who's entry level could be helping with setting up those collection forms, understanding what the scientists or project managers need in terms of all the attributes, and communicating, the technical needs translated into data. That's a huge role of GIS people, knowing how to cross that bridge and present people options with what the final product's going to look like. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity for GIS in the environmental space, but it's really a career decision up to you whether or not you want to make it a primary function of your role or have GIS supplement your primary role as a scientist.
Thank you, Kendall. That was very informative. And our next question, can students begin a career in GIS prior to their graduation? If so, what are some entry-level positions they should apply to? Can you provide some guidance for young learners and beginners starting out? And I'm gonna hand this off to Sara.
Yeah, thank you. Students can definitely begin their career in GIS prior to graduation. I would just say two main things. One is that it's going to look much different than when you are looking for a full-time role or entering the GIS industry after graduation. And the second thing I would say is it's definitely not going to be a perfect fit or, you know, it's not going to be exactly what you want to do maybe at the very beginning with these roles that you first start out with. So talking about what kind of roles they might be or what titles or how you should find these things is focus on looking for internships, look for temporary positions, or they might even be calling them seasonal positions if it's a summer position or a winter position. Those will be much more suited to GIS students than trying to find a part-time position. I know that that can be a little bit of a unicorn. I know Kendal was looking for some part-time work and maybe she could share her journey in that. And I also have a mentee who was trying to find a part-time GIS position and just wasn't really seeing that advertised. So focus on internships and seasonal work, and that might be something that's a little bit easier to break into. I know a lot of public sector companies will have, or agencies will have internships at the Department of Transportation. We have a very strong intern program and really want students to come in, and we're flexible with them. We know they need to prioritize school, and we cap their hours at part-time during the semester so they can focus on school. in terms of some guidance there, I would rely so heavily on your school resources while you have them. In your geography department, or if it's the planning department, I would bet that there is a dedicated person to internships and setting you up for a career in GIS. I know at Arizona State University, we have an intern coordinator, and their whole job is to find those internships and get students plugged into that. That's going to be your number one, the easiest route. The coordinator is going to know a student can apply and get that internship, and they're going to be able to give you that curated list. Let's see, anything else on that? I mean, it's going to be tough, and finding that balance, but internships is really the way to go through that. And just ending on, as long as it's GIS adjacent and you get to do a little bit of GIS, that's really all you're looking for. So you can get that experience on your resume and find that position after graduation that's full-time that fits you a lot better. It doesn't even need to be in the same industry. Or even maybe during the internship, you decide you don't like that industry at all. It's still good experience for you. Don't let that dissuade you from just getting your foot in the door and then leveraging that into something that fits you much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with what Sarah said. Any internship while you're in school, as many internships as you can, because internships are geared towards students. Once you've graduated, you can't apply for many. I mean, I'm sure there are some still, but like they want to give you the student credits for it. And I had an internship in like a brain science lab that was using geospatial stuff. Totally not my field, but it was a great experience seeing what research looks like. I had an internship just digitizing all day, every day. And I was like, oh, I kind of like being behind the computer. It doesn't bother me. Ethan, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, definitely. I think internships, like you were saying, are great, but if you're struggling to find an internship, which a lot of students are in that boat, and if you don't have resources, like an internship promoter, one thing that I found was really helpful in my college career was doing personal projects. So a lot of local county governments, Esri's Living Atlas are free, open data that you can take and manipulate and create a personal project out of that. Again, you can create maps. A lot of universities will have a free Esri license subscription. You can work with QGIS, some open source software if that's more your avenue. There's opportunities for you to create an own personal project that will give you the experience to get that internship. So there's kind of different levels. And if you're getting discouraged trying to find an internship, I would go back and look at, well, what have I done before? If I've only done student projects, maybe that's an opportunity for you to do a personal project and take on some other data and do some more complex advanced analysis or presentation skills.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. All right, our next question. What advice do you have for someone changing careers and trying to enter the GIS field? So I'm guessing this is avoiding students and young professionals, probably someone a little bit older. So I'm going to hand it off to Kendal.
Yeah, so kind of back to a point I previously made is thinking about your goal. Are you trying to use GIS to supplement or improve your existing passion? It could be public health, it could be real estate, it could be product marketing, or are you in a completely different, non-technical, non-STEM related field and GIS interests you? If you are kind of adjacent to GIS already and are technical, maybe you have some experience in computer science or databases, learning the fundamentals of GIS and applying that to that industry is extremely helpful. One place I'd look if you're kind of already familiar with data and technical things is the GISP certification blueprint. Has all the kind of requirements of a well-rounded GIS professional, and a lot of it, depending how close you are to the field, may seem very confusing, but that gisci.org website gives a really well-rounded picture of what's required to be a seasoned GIS professional. So basics of map projections, cartography, data analysis, mapping platforms, it'll all be in there. Previous points made about taking trainings and YouTube and LinkedIn are all great. In terms of education, if you are not really involved in GIS closely at the moment, I would definitely recommend at least a 4-year degree, and it really can be in anything. That's what the beautiful thing about GIS is. You could have a degree in English and go get a certificate or a master's in GIS. Previous points about performing personal projects. Maybe you see a lot of litter around your community. Try out one of the Esri field apps and try collecting some data and design a form. You've become a spatial data master. So I think also illuminating the soft skills about being a clear communicator and a critical thinker are really good skill sets to have for someone in GIS. Yep, we only have a few minutes, so that's really the high level stuff if anyone else wants to chime in.
It looks like you did an amazing job, Kendall. Thank you so much. So that was our last question, everybody. I want to thank the panelists so much for giving us your final words of wisdom. I'm going to miss you guys next year when we're doing our future Mappy Q&As. If your question wasn't answered in this Mappy Q&A, or if you had new questions, keep an eye out for the 2025 schedule. We'll put that up. This video will be on YouTube. I want to highlight our QR code to you can use that to look at the future GPN events. And one little last shout out for the Vanguard Cabinet. We have a new Routes and Routes survey. I don't have the link handy with me. Maybe someone can drop it in the chat, but if not, it's all over our LinkedIn. So thank you so much, attendees as well, current and future watchers. We appreciate you so much and have a great GIS week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.